Um, Today's presentation is about occupancy-based requirements, building height and area limitations, BNBC 2020. Today is 21st April 2021. I'm Ziaul Islam, presenting this webinar. This is part of Urban Resilience Project S09 training. Today's module is NS2. So today we'll have 3 segments with almost equal timing, each with 40 minutes and 5 minutes recesses in between. At the end of the segments, we will have a question answer session of 15 minutes. So the segment 1 will give us a general requirement for all occupancies, and it will focus on the occupancy-based requirements generally for all occupancies, building height generally for all occupancies, and area limitations, general requirements. So this will be the segment 1. Segment 2 will be more elaborate and will be focusing on detail or specific information on occupancies. We will cover occupancies A to G at the first segment, that is segment 2. The rest of the occupancies will be covered in the third segment. So in both segment 2 and segment 3, we will have very specific requirements for each of the occupancies mentioned in part 3, chapter 2. So today's session will mainly focus on part 3, chapter 2 of PNBC. And so let us start with segment 1. Occupancy-based requirements, building height and area limitation. What are the general requirements for all the occupancies? So to know the general requirements, we will go to section 2.4 of part 3, chapter 2. If you have the BNBC available with you, it will be on page 2673. So you can have a parallel reference from there if you wish. Part 3, chapter 2, section 2.4. It covers basically these 6 subtopics. One is location on property, then the allowable floor areas, then permitted types of construction, general provisions for high-rise buildings, helipads, universal accessibility. However, in the structure of PNBC, we must understand that no particular chapter or part is self-sufficient. We always use cross-referencing with different parts and chapters of this code. So generally, part 3 is for occupancy classification and construction classification. Part 4 is for fire safety. Part 5 is for building materials. Part 6 for structure. Part 7 for safety of construction. And part 8 deals with fuel, gas supply, and so on. So whenever it comes to issues like that we need cross-referencing, we always refer it to some other part or some other chapter. So maybe all the answers are not be available in this particular part or chapter, but there will be references, of course, to lead you to some other part or other chapter where you can find the answers for your questions. So in our scope of this presentation, probably we will cover only this particular segment, that is part 3, chapter 2, with a few references with other part 3 components. But we won't go to other parts like part 4, 5, 6 because of shortage of time, and also because that will be covered by others in the next presentations. So as I have mentioned earlier, that this is section 2.4 general requirements for all occupancies. But when it comes to the specific requirements, we will go to section 2.5 to section 2.17. They will contain specific requirements. But as you can see that the subtopics, in the subtopics, we have identified 7 subtopic categories, and we have marked them with a format that is like 2.x.1, 2.x.2. So what is this x? This x will be replaced by 2.x will be replaced by 2.5 or 2.6 or 2.7 or 2.17, something like that. This is quite a common format for specific requirement. There will be some variations. There will be some new subtopics for some particular occupancies, but most of the time we will see that these 7 points will be available in all the occupancies. So it's like when we go to the first occupancy, like residential occupancy, we will find that there are provisions at the very beginning for construction height and allowable area. Then will be a subtopic called location of property, location on property. The third one will be access and exit facilities and egress system. Fourth one is lighting and ventilation and sanitation. The fifth one is minimum dimension of rooms. Then shaft and exit enclosures, and fire detection, alarm, evacuation, and extinguishing system. These will be common, more or less common, to all the specific requirements of all occupancies. And they also will cross-reference with other chapters or other part, as I have mentioned earlier. So what is this cross-reference? Say at the very beginning, we will find that there is a cross-reference for section 1.8. It will be referred time and again because it is a very vital information in the first chapter of part 3. So this section 1.8 is especially I have taken 2 subtopics here, two sections here from 1.8. Those are very much relevant to each of the occupancies. So what does it mention? It mentions that for educational, institutional, and healthcare occupancy, the total open area in a plot shall not be less than 50% of the plot area. So particularly it restricts the building volume, area of the building, and the open space is defined here. At least 50% of the total site area must be remained open for particularly these 3 particular occupancies. And for the second para, as we can see that the rest of the occupancies which are not mentioned in section 1.8.3 shall, the open space for them shall not be less than 33% of the plot area. So overall, they will have more built area and relatively lesser plot area, open area, but B, C, and D will have much larger open area. So this is a particular reference that will come time and again for different occupancies, but this is a common reference for almost all the occupancies. So we will not revisit section 1.8 time and again to check it. So this is a common section that is referred to almost many of the sections, either for built area information or for open area information or building room size or anything. It will be referred to section 1.8, and we can understand that it is already covered in section 1.8 of chapter 1 and part 3. So we will have a complete reference of a reference chart of the sections later on in this presentation. So let us start with our section 2.4. So I'll switch the presentation to a different file. I think you can see it. So the section 2.4 of part 3 chapter 2, this is the page I'm showing directly from the BNBC 2020 gadget. So you can see that this is page number 2673. We are starting from here, and at the very beginning we have a subtopic called location on property. So this is a general requirement for all the occupancies. As I have mentioned, that specific requirements starts from 2.5. 2.4 is for general requirements. So the first subtopic is location on property. So what it says? It says that all plots where the building will be constructed shall have public access, access to public road actually. So it can be from multiple sides or can from one side, but they must have an access to public road. So this is the criteria for location, one criteria. But there are other criteria for location, like fire separation distance. How will it be measured? It will be measured from the face of the peripheral wall of a building to the adjacent property line. So this is another guideline about the open space. Actually, this all will create a reference for the built volume later on. So since this is about the setback, as you can understand, this particular subsection is about the setback. It says how it will be measured. It will be measured from the property line to the building's peripheral wall, face of the building's peripheral wall. However, for public roads adjoining along the property, we have an exceptional situation. So what is that? So for fire separation, we can measure it from half of the road width. So things are like this, as I can at least draw from this information. Let me share you with a drawing platform. So say for example that here is a road somewhere and there is a building plot here. So it says that if there is a building inside, the distance in between the plot boundary and the edge of the building, outside edge of the building, will be considered as the fire separation distance. But for the purpose of this code, if the road is a public road, then the fire separation distance at the front will be this. So that is the basic idea. So actually fire separation distance and setback distance may coincide or may not coincide. So this is the idea of the of this particular segment. So let's go back to the topic. So the later part of the of this subsection says that two or more buildings on the same plot, distances of imaginary lines equidistant from all sides of buildings shall be considered. We have already discussed it in the last presentation, and we have shown how an imaginary line will be drawn within the site and setback will be calculated, or separation distance will be calculated from that. So then comes about information about opening. When there will be an exterior wall, it must have a fire resistance rating, and an opening protection will be required, because in a wall which is resisting the spreading of fire must be protected with proper rated openings. So that is the idea, and it has some specifications in the tables where it refers to, and outward projected elements, anything like sunshade or anything, if we project anything, shall be limited to the sunshade line. Then another general requirement that when openings in the walls, exterior wall, it has to be protected, but the aggregate of such openings shall not exceed 50% of the total area of the wall in each story. So we have a ratio about how large openings or how many openings or how much area of opening we can create for each floor in the exterior wall, which is fire protected. So the other general information here says that the separation walls in semi-detached or row type volume shall comply with section 2.4.3. So there is another reference of section 2.4.3. It is somewhere down this road that it will comply with this particular section. So this is another thing I think we can at least have an idea. So it is about the separation walls. It sometimes it is also called it's called party walls. So the semi-detached or row type development, it is like as you can already guess. Sorry. So this is a semi-detached situation. Semi-detached in a sense that buildings are joined or sharing one wall and the other sides are open. So it is not a fully detached building like this one. It is a semi-detached situation. So they can share wall at the boundary line, at the property line. So when it happens, the code says the code says that the separations wall will comply with section 2.4.3, the guidelines of section 2.4.3. So it must be taken care of. In a row type, the walls will be shared in two sides actually, rather than one side. So allowable floor area, another general information for all occupancies, is that the total building area will be in compliance with section 1.8.3 of chapter 1. So then again we are referred to section 1.8.3, which basically deals with open space situation of a site and space requirements. So we can go there and find out what the informations are. It is also covering many other informations which may not be related to this particular section, or it may refer, the section 1.8.3 may refer us to some other sections or subsections as well. So it is a kind of connected information or network where we start from one point, we go to the next reference point, and we can look for information. We can find the information there, or we can look for more information in some other reference point. The structure works like that. So the next subsection says that the floor of mezzanines shall be included in the area of the respective main floor. So how the mezzanine floors will be included in the area. So there is a reference that if you have two levels in a mezzanine level in between, there might be some other floors. So if there is a mezzanine floor here, it will be counted with this particular floor, the respective main floor. So that is the basic idea. Then comes a very important point. We are actually getting to the area calculation segment. It starts from 2.4.2, and 2.4.2.3 is also covering it. So what does it say? In floor area calculation, it shall be divided into two. A, all floor areas at and above the formation level, which shall be generally included in the FAR calculation. B, floor area below the formation level shall be generally excluded in the FAR calculation, provided that the occupancy classification remains within utility or private garages. So this segment is giving us a direction about the FAR calculation, how it will be calculated. So then comes a table which refers to the fire resistance rating for the exterior wall. As we can see the references above, where fire exterior walls were referred many times. So we can see that different occupancies and for different fire separation setbacks, this can be compared with setbacks as well, that the fire rating of the occupancy of the exterior wall varies considerably from occupancy to occupancies. So here there is another chart which says about opening protection. So when we have an exterior wall fire resistance rated and we need to open there, give an opening, we need opening protection assemblies. So here is the reference, that this is the reference for the fire rated wall, how many hours it will be protected, and the respective rating of the opening assemblies, corresponding opening assemblies here. So 2.4.3 deals with permitted type of construction. Construction for any occupancy shall conform to specifications set in table 3.2.4. So table 3.2.4, we can have a as we can at least recall from the early presentation, that it contains the construction classifications, table 3.2.4. So any type of construction for any occupancy must conform to the specifications of table 3.2.4. And the second point says that common walls in semi-detached or row type development. I'm not going into the details. One thing is it will have to be type 1 construction with no unprotected openings, but shall comply with the requirement of party wall and firewall or separation wall. So it gives the detail. We can, if we go to the part 4 section about the party wall, then we will get all the information related to construction type and protected openings. The next segment, general information or general criteria for all occupancies, says that ground floor on basement of a building used for car parking and utilities within the barriers by at least 3 hours fire resistive construction shall be considered as non-separated occupancy. From yesterday's presentation, we already know about non-separated occupancy. So it can be created simultaneously in the same building where the main occupancy is located if it is separated by 3 hour fire resistive construction. So the barrier will be 3 hours fire resistive constructions. Provided the building accommodates one or more of the following occupancies. So it is not open for all occupancies. It is open for A3 and A5, E1, F1 and F2, I2, I3 and I4. So these are the 8 occupancies that can have this particular facility. Entry lobby, mechanical, electrical rooms and other similar uses incidental to the operation of the building may be provided in the car parking floor. So the services and utilities needed for particular operation of the building, of the main occupancy, can be connected with, can be located in the car parking floor, provided that the total area of such uses remain within 1/3 of the parking floor area. So here comes the permitted type of construction. Already we have an orientation about different type of constructions like group 1 and group 2. So the table says that particularly for occupancy J, group 1 construction is mandatory and it must be located in fire zone 3. The other groups, there is a secondary classification where they will be located in fire zone 2 and they can be of both group 1 and group 2 occupancies, but there are some footnotes on it. And same thing is goes for group 1 and group 2 occupancies, which can be located in fire zone 1, and these are the occupancies that can be located there. So what is the footnote here? Let us have a look. Fire resistance rating of a building shall be credited in case of the the mixed type of construction on the basis of lower rated construction elements. So it is the lower rated construction element that will dictate the fire rating of the building among the same group or same type of time used thereof. So that is the general information, mostly about construction, area calculation. Now comes the part where we are dealing with high rise. So the high rise, for high rise, general provisions are, first we have to define it. So it has, as you can see, two definitions here rather. One is a high rise which has it has floors used for human occupancy located more than 33 meters from ground level. So that is one definition for high rise. Or there is another definition, the lowest level of fire department vehicle access. So actually it is contextualized in cities where we have a fire department with large fire ladders. The first definition will be applied, and for towns and secondary cities and tertiary cities where the fire department's vehicles cannot access a huge height, it will be determined by the fire department vehicle access level. So that is what the provisions are. The provision of section 2.9.6 shall be applicable to all such buildings. Okay, so we'll have another clue about this in section 2.9.6. So what will happen to this particular type of arrangement? When we make a high rise, we need to maintain and inspect it in a regular interval. So all fire protection systems shall be maintained and inspected on a regular basis to keep them in operative condition. The maintenance inspection shall be performed quarterly. In all high-rise buildings, it must be there. So it is more of an operational guideline. All plumbing installations shall be maintained and inspected periodically to keep them in operative conditions. So this is the safety precaution that in case of any fire emergency or anything, they all run properly. So this is a maintenance and inspection clause included in the code. It is more of an operational guideline. So type of construction, all high-rise buildings shall be of type 1A or type B, 1B construction. Fire detection, alarm evacuation, and extinguishment system. So here it doesn't elaborate about this particular facility. It says that it has to conform with the regulations of part 4 of this code. So about fire or emergency evacuation or exit, we will always be referred to part 4 of this code, which will be covered later on. There is an option for helipers in high rise. So helipers, when helipers on the rooftop of a building or other locations shall be constructed in accordance with this section. So it has guidelines for size, construction, aviation approval, so forth. So I'm not going into the detail of these informations. Then comes the universal accessibility issue. So universal accessibility is, as you all know, that a large section of our society are often physically challenged or either permanently or temporarily. So we must have universal accessibility provisions, but there are few exemptions that in occupancies G, H, M, and J, it is not mandatory. So other than that, all occupancies, all buildings shall have universal accessibility. So it is, apart from these 4 occupancies out of 13, the other 9 occupancies must have universal accessibility. So where the universal accessibility is a mandatory issue, there we must follow the second guideline as well. That is that we must have a accessible egress system. So in case of emergency, there will be provision for people with incapability or disability or different types of ability to egress through the system properly, safely. So this is very important that buildings, occupancies, at least 9 occupancies will have universal accessibility. And we have a separate appendix for that. The provisions of code is mentioned in an appendix in this part. So we have a separate accessibility appendix, and it covers almost all the guidelines needed for general purpose and for emergency purpose as well. So, so this is the end of segment 2.4, and then we go for the specific requirements for occupancy A to M. So that will be the second component of our presentation today. So actually this is end of segment 1, and thank you for listening. And as you know, you can have your questions in the question answer box. We will answer it at the end of the presentation in the question answer session. You can just write it down, and we will have our discussion then. So thank you all, and I'm taking a recess for 5 minutes. Thanks. Okay, thank you. So let's start with segment 2 of today's webinar. Now we will have detailed information on each of the occupancies, and mostly focusing on the occupancy-based requirements, their building height, required building height, and area limitations. So this particular segment will focus on each of the occupancies in detail. So we'll start with residential occupancy, occupancy A. It is the section 2.5 of this part 3 chapter 2. The subsections here are construction, height, and allowable area. 2.5.1. 2.5.2 is location on property. 2.5.3 is access and exit facilities and egress system. 2.5.4 is lighting and ventilation. 2.5.5 is sanitation. 2.5.6 is minimum dimension of habitable and non-habitable rooms. 2.5.7 fire detection, alarm, and evacuation system. 2.5.8 shaft and exit enclosure. So these are the subsections which have information, elaborate information on each of the subsections. So let's move to that first. We will start with occupancy class A, occupancy A. So it is the residential building. As you can see that the first subsection is about construction, height, and allowable area. So it at the very beginning, it says that uh, the limitation of types of construction will be set by table 3.2.4. So it is the construction classification table, as you can remember: type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. Sorry, type 1A, 1B, 1C, 1B, and type 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D. So that is the chart, and it refers about the occupancies accordingly. So this is the type of construction, and the area and height will be guided by section 1.8 and 2.4.2 of this part. So there are references about area and height in 1.8 and 2.4.2. At the same time, let us include another subsection, that is section 1.9. It specifically give us information on height. So that will also be consulted time and again. So about the walls and floors separating dwelling units, it is the exterior walls and floors separating dwelling units, or it might be interior walls where dwelling units are separated by the walls, shall not be less than type 1D construction. So it has to be minimum type 1D construction, that is 1 hour rated construction. So that is the minimum requirement. Storage or laundry rooms in occupancy A2, A3, A4, and A5 that are used in common by other occupants, shall be at least of type 1D construction. So if there is any common storage area for the apartment, hotel, or other occupancies, or a laundry room that is used by occupants in common, so that will be of type 1D construction. So these are construction guidelines, and the area and height guidelines will be specified by these two sections. When a basement of a or a ground floor of a building of occupancy A3 or A5 is used for parking, this is about particular two occupancies, A3 and A5. When its basement or ground floor is used for parking or storage of private cars of the occupants, the parking floor shall be of at least type 1B construction. So there is another criteria. We already know that type 1B is 3 hour protected construction. So it is when there will be parking, that will be at least 3 hours protection of construction. So this is about mixed occupancy. When it is mixed with occupancy A3 or A5, what will be the type of construction that is guided here. When the basement or ground floor of a building of occupancy A is used wholly or partially for generator or electrical substation, then the walls and floors surrounding such use shall be at least type 1B construction. So that is also a 3 hour fire rated construction. So parking and generator and electrical substations requires special attention. Location on property. Building occupancy A shall comply with the requirements for location on property and fire resistive exterior walls and openings as specified in this code. So it is a general reference. It is not leading us to anywhere else. We have to go through the related part 3 and part 4 segments and have a general idea of how it can be done. So the location of property will be located with that compliance. Like I think I can at least clarify certain issues on this part. Say for example, if a site is permitted for only detached occupancies, then things will be like that. So the location of building will vary, but if the same site is permitted for semi-detached occupancies, it will be like this. So the location will be another situation. And if it is for row house type, then it might happen that the location will vary accordingly. So that is the basic understanding. However, it is determined by setback rules and fire separation rules. So from that part, we can have this general idea of location of building in the property. So about access and exit facilities and egress system. This is a general statement as well, that all access, exit and egress or escape shall comply with the provisions set forth in this code. Basically, it will refer to part 4. And there is a separate chapter for dealing with these issues. So we'll see for other occupancies as well that it will refer again and again to that particular chapter of part 4. Now comes a particular special information about only occupancy A here. That is that every sleeping room in ground, first and second floors, so it is for 3 floors only, every sleeping room shall have at least one operable window or door for emergency escape, which shall open directly into the exterior or an interior courtyard. So this is an emergency evacuation measure. From the bedrooms, there will be an emergency escape option. The units shall be operable from the inside without the use of any tool to provide a minimum clear opening of 500 millimeter width by 600 millimeter height with a maximum seal height of 1 meter above the floor. So there is a very specific guideline how the opening will be located, where the opening will be located, and what will be the dimension of it. So this is a special provision for occupancy A about emergency exit. Lighting and ventilation. Lighting and ventilation is basically covered in some provisions of part 3 and chapter 1 and 3 of part 8. Which deals with mechanical ventilation and everything. So the lighting and ventilation criteria will be covered by these 2 areas, and we have to conform to that, those guidelines. The sanitation will also be referred to part to this part, and also part 7 of chapter 7 of part 8. So part 8 covers both lighting, ventilation and sanitation. In the later occupancies, we will see that this segregation doesn't exist. In many occupancies, lighting, ventilation and sanitations are in one subsection. Minimum dimension of habitable and non-habitable rooms. This is also not elaborated in this particular subsection. It says that the minimum dimension of habitable and non-habitable rooms are specified in section 1.12.2 in chapter 1 part 3. So there are specifications for habitable and non-habitable rooms. It specifies the minimum dimension for each of the rooms. So it will be guided by that section. Fire detection and alarm. fire detection, alarm, evacuation, and extinguishment. So this is an issue of part 4, and it is elaborated there, so it is referred to that part. Shaft and exit enclosure. Shafts must be any vertical elevator shaft, vent shaft, or vertical opening shaft shall be enclosed. It cannot be open, so it has to be enclosed, conforming to provisions of table 3.3.1a and b. So there is a table for particular shafts and vents, and we have to comply with that. And exit requirements shall comply with part 4 of this code. So there is some exit requirements regarding these shafts and exit enclosures in part 4. We must consult that. So this is what occupancy is specific requirements are. So before starting occupancy B, we will take a look of a general referencing system of this code. So actually, for all occupancies, we will see that from now on, from section 2.5 to 2.17, we will have the same thing repeated. That is the right column here, the requirements for each occupancy. It will be repeated again and again for each occupancies, which is dealing with construction, height, allowable area, location on property, access exit facilities, egress system, lighting, ventilation, sanitation, minimum dimension of habitable and non-habitable rooms, fire detection, alarm, evacuation, extinguishment, shaft and exit enclosures. And with a few exceptions, they all actually carry the similar referencing sections and chapters. For construction, height, and allowable area, we will visit section 1.8, 1.9, chapter 1, part 3, and section 2.4.2, table 3.2.4, chapter 2, part 3. So this is a common referencing point for the components here. And what does it contain? It's contain open spaces within a plot and general height and area limitations. So these are the information or topic it covers. So for particular segment of part 3, to understand the occupancy need of part 3, sometimes we have to go to chapter 1. We are dealing with chapter 2 here, but we will have to go to chapter 1 of part 3, and sometimes other segments of other section of part 2, section 2, chapter 2, part 3. So this is one thing. Same is for location of property, but for fire exit, we have to visit a different part, part 4. It deals with fire and safety. For lighting, ventilation, and sanitation, we will visit part 8, specifically chapter 7 of part 8, which deals with fuel and gas supply. And then again, there are some requirements that is from part 3, chapter 1. So that deals with requirements of plots or plot sizes. Minimum dimension of habitable and non-habitable rooms, that is again referred to part 3, chapter 1, and anything related to fire is referred to part 4, and shaft and exit enclosures, it is also referred to part 4, especially to the chapter 3. So this is the general referencing system of all occupancies, detailed specification. In the next slides, when we will go through the other occupancies, we will skip some of the common referencing points, because already in occupancy classification A, we have discussed them in more or less detail. So we will skip the general referencing, common referencing elements, and we'll try to focus on particular specific requirement of that particular occupancy. So I think we can go back to occupancy B. So occupancy B, as usual, it deals with these 7 subsections, which are quite common. We are already familiar with these names, these titles of the subsections. So let us go back to occupancy B and see what is there. So this is occupancy B. The first chapter is a general statement, like which sections it refers to, the general provisions, and the second para is basically about a special provision for occupancy B. As we know that occupancy B is about education institutions, and it might deal with laboratories and special situations which may have hazardous issues. So for that particular aspect, there is a guideline. Rooms or groups of rooms sharing a common space where flammable liquids, combustible dust, or hazardous materials are used, stored, developed, or handled in an amount exceeding that specified in section 2.14.3 shall be classified as occupancy J. So as we already know about the exempted amount for hazardous material, if it is within the exempted amount, then it can be kept in a control area and can be part of the main occupancy. But if it crosses that amount, if it exceeds that amount, then it shall be classified as occupancy J, that is hazardous occupancy. So in that case, a particular project like a university, say for example, have something of a hazardous nature in its lab, and it cannot be the unseparated part of the main occupancy. It has to be separated and detached if the hazard situation is like that. So that is the basic idea here. Rooms or groups of rooms sharing a common space or having separate spaces served by a common corridor or passage with less than 20% outdoor openings of wall in a building of height 11 meter or less or 3 stories or less need not be provided with smoke detectors and standpipe or sprinkler systems. So as we can have an idea from this highlighted segment that buildings of height of 11 meter or 3 story may need smoke detectors and standpipe or sprinkler system. This is an exemption section that exempts particularly B category, B classification, B occupancy of buildings from getting the stricter rules for fire detection, smoke detection, and standpipe and sprinkler system up to 3 storied, and the corridor might be a double loaded situation where only 20% is for outdoor opening area. So it has certain limitations, but still it may not need smoke detectors and standpipe and sprinkler systems. However, it has to confirm that the access and exit requirements specified in Part 3, Chapter 1, Section 1.6 and Part 4, Chapter 4 and 5, it conforms to that. So if it conforms to that, this provision can be done. So buildings of occupancy B suitable outside the jurisdiction of situated outside the jurisdiction of any municipality shall have a construction of at least 2 hours fire resistance. So this is covering maybe schools in remote areas which are not under the jurisdiction of municipality. However, it must be, it's not only about school but any occupancy of B category. So they must be constructed with at least 2 hour fire resistance. So we are not going into detail for location of property, access and exit facilities and egress system, lighting, ventilation and sanitation. We are going directly to the minimum dimension of classrooms, common toilets and staircases. So it is a specific requirement for particularly this segment, occupancy B. So the dimension of classrooms shall not be less than 4 meter on any side and shall have an area not less than 0.75 square meter per student. So that is the space requirement here. Other provisions will comply like general references as done in other occupancies. So the shaft and exit enclosure, fire detection, alarm, evacuation and extinguishing system, these are all rest of the occupancies. It is referred to some other sections or chapters. That is the end of occupancy B. Let us start with occupancy C. It is institutional building. As you can see, we haven't marked here, but it is mostly typical referencing to other chapters. So construction height and allowable area doesn't specify anything special. Location on property, the same to other occupancies, access and exit facilities and egress system. As referred to, as it is not same in a sense that the criteria is same, but they are all referred to the same subsection or chapters or part of this code. So these are all referred to the other sections and parts of the code. So for institutional buildings, there is no special criteria needed here. So for occupancy D, that is healthcare facilities, it is again the similar requirements that it is referring for construction height and allowable area. It is referring to table 3.2.4, section 1.8, section 2.4.2. These are common referencing point for height and area limitations. So this is for location and property. It is again referring to section 2.4.1. Egress, access and exit facilities, referring to part 3, chapter 1, section 1.6, part 4, chapter 3. Lighting, ventilation, sanitation, referring to 1.1.6, part 3, chapter 1, and 1 and 3 of chapter 1 and 3 of part 8. So here you can see that already sanitation is not a separate subsection. It comes along with lighting, ventilation and sanitation. So shaft and enclosure, it is referred to chapter 3 of part 4. Fire detection, alarm, evacuation, extinguisher system, it is also referred to part 4. For business occupancy, it is again the reference points are similar table 3.2.1, 1.8, section 1.8 of chapter 1 part 3 section 2.4.2 of this particular chapter, location of property section 2.4.1, access exit facilities, similar referencing, lighting, ventilation, similar references, shaft and enclosures, similar references, fire detection, evacuation and extinguishing system, refer to part 4. So let us go to the mercantile occupancy. The mercantile occupancy is almost similar in subsections. They are referring to the same tables and sections of different chapters and parts. However, there is a special hazard clause in this mercantile occupancy F. So there is a special clause here, a bit different from others. So what is the clause? It says that installations which are discharging exhaust, heating apparatus, boiler, and central heating or air conditioning plant shall conform to the provision of this code as specified in the code. So for particularly mercantile section, there is a special hazard clause, and the designer must take account to that. So now comes the requirement for occupancy G. We will actually end this particular segment with details of occupancy G. We have made some changes from the PowerPoint we have provided to you. It was in the segment 3, but in considering the time available, we think that occupancy G will be involved in the second segment. So this is the last segment we will be this is the last occupancy we will be discussing in this segment. So about occupancy G, it is the industrial building category, as you know. So the general information is here, but there are some specific instructions that is referring that a non-exhaustive and indicative list of low hazard and moderate hazard industrial uses are listed in A to Z list. So we have an A to Z list, as we can recall, at the end of this chapter, actually, chapter 2. So there is a list containing low hazard and moderate hazard industrial uses. We can consult the table to find in which category our particular industrial building falls into. So this is a reference at the beginning. And then the first para states the general information, like which general requirements are to be met, referring to the other sections like any other occupancies. So the second para says that the ceiling height of the production area shall conform to the minimum volume required per worker. So there is a specific requirement for a working environment. A worker must have a minimum volume, and that is specified by Bangladesh Labour Act 2006. So that minimum volume of air or volume must be ensured in the production area. So the ceiling height of a production area will be guided by that guideline. So That is one particular specific rule about occupancy G that needs attention. Then there is another rule about height, that ceiling height and the headroom clearances of a production floor shall not be less than 3.3 meter and 2.286 meter respectively. So for ceiling height, it has to be minimum 3.3 meters. And for headroom clearance, maybe for some landing situation or particularly a very transitory space, it will be minimum 2.286 meters. So so these are two basic guidelines about the height of the production area of a production floor for any industrial occupancy G. And there are special provisions for lighting and ventilation situations. So for lighting and ventilation and sanitation, first it has to conform with like other occupancies with the general guidelines set forth in part 3 and part 8 in different chapters. But industrial buildings, when it has a roof opening for daylight situation or for natural ventilation, they shall comply with the following requirements. So what are the requirements? The first requirement is that the aggregate opening, it is the aggregate of the opening in roof and external windows, shall not be less than 10% of the floor area. So it is including both roof and external windows, and the aggregate shall not be less than 10% of the floor area. The second clause says that for natural ventilation by means of exterior window opening, so it's about natural ventilation. For exterior opening, the operable window area shall not be less than 5% of the total floor area. So the operable window area, that is also very important because natural ventilation will be ensured by that. It will not be less than 5% of the floor area. So there are exceptions. The clauses are here. Maybe there are some industries that don't require the natural ventilation and rely on artificial environment more. So for that special situation, this exception is made. It says that industrial building wherein artificial lighting and mechanically operated ventilation systems of approved quality are installed need not be provided with natural ventilation or natural lighting. So it is not mandatory for them to provide natural ventilation and natural lighting because maybe the production process needs a particular specific controlled environment of light and ventilation. So this is the situation. For shaft and enclosure, it is common to other occupancies, refers to the same points. Fire detection, alarm, evacuation, and extinguishment always refer to part 4 of this code. And now comes to the now we coming to the special hazard situation. So special hazard, it's about the chimneys, vents, and ventilation ducts shall be constructed with uncombustible materials. So as we can all guess that industrial environment may need chimneys, vents, and ventilation duct. So they all must be made with uncombustible material. Even boiler, central heating plants, electrical rooms, or hot water supply boiler shall be separated from the rest of the occupancy and used by not less than 2-hour fire resistive construction. So there are two things about these particular components, that they shall be separated from the main occupancy, and also not only main occupancy, from the rest of the occupancies. If there are other occupancies, they will be separated from them as well. So one is separation, the other is that they will have a fire resistive construction that is not less than 2 hours. So therefore, starting from occupancy B, we have gone through the following specific requirements for occupancy C, D, E, F, and G. Probably we are quite ahead of time, but I think this is the end of segment 2. So let's take a break for now, and we will start segment 3 after, say, 5 minutes. Thank you. So we are back again, and let us go to the next segment of our presentation. This is segment 3, almost similar to segment 2, just dealing with a few more occupancies, H, I, J, K, L, and M. A few of them are new, so they will have much more elaboration, new rules or specific rules. We'll go into the details for them. So let's start. For occupancy H, industrial building, as you can see that we have highlighted a few sections, subsections. One is lighting, ventilation, and sanitation. The other is separation, special hazard. Probably there is a mistake here in the title. It's not industrial building. Occupancy H is for storage. So please make a note that this is not industrial building. This is storage occupancy. Oops. Okay, just have a note that this is storage. So let's move to the detail of the occupancy H. Occupancy H is for storage buildings. It has a general statement, like all occupancies for construction height and allow areas, referring to the same points of references. For location and property, similar references, access and exit facilities and egress systems, similar references, lighting, ventilation, and sanitation, similar references. Now, at the beginning, there are similar references, but it has subsections which needs elaboration. So there are special provisions. The provision of section 1.16 does not apply to non-habitable spaces. Well, so there are two types of spaces as per definition. One is habitable, one is non-habitable. For particular storage section, there are spaces where there are lots of non-habitable spaces are. So for for this particular occupancy, it is separately mentioned that while there will be non-habitable spaces in H1 and H2 occupancies, there will be some relaxation from section 1.1.6 for that particular non-habitable spaces. So if it is not unless otherwise mentioned or required by the code. So if it is required, it has to comply with 1.1.6, but if not, for non-habitable spaces, provisions of section 1.1.6 will not apply. So therefore, what will happen for non-habitable spaces? Ventilators of size not less than 0.2 square meter shall be provided where suitable 0.30 meter above the floor level for floor level ventilators and 0.30 meter below the roof level for roof level ventilators. So there are two types of ventilators in such spaces. And we will need two types of ventilators, one located near floor and the other located near the roof. And there is specific measurements for those locations where it will be placed. So there shall be one floor level ventilator and one roof level ventilator for every 0.25 square meter of the floor area. So there will be, for a larger area, there will be multiple ventilators, but following the same rule that for particular 1.25 square meter unit, there will be two ventilators, one at roof level, one at floor levels. Mechanized ventilation system of approved quality shall also be installed where required. So if necessary, mechanized ventilation system can be installed there. But there is a special clause that though inhabitable, the minimum air quality of such indoor spaces shall be maintained in a way that it does not pose any health hazard to the occasional users of that space. So it doesn't mean that if it is inhabitable or non-habitable, it will have such a poor quality of air or ventilation that it can pose health hazard to users or occupants who are occasionally visiting that space. So this is to ensure safety of the visitors or users. So for shaft enclosure, shaft and other enclosures, it is quite similar, the reference points. Fire detection alarm and extinguishing system, evacuation, again part 4. For special hazards, the storage of hazardous material shall not exceed the exempt amount. So now we can remember at least there was a table for exempt amount. There are actually two tables referring to the exempt amounts. So if it is within the limit of that, it falls into this category, storage category. But if it exceeds that capacity, it will go to the hazardous category. The storage of moderate and low hazard materials, hazardous materials, shall be separated at least by 2-hour fire resistive construction. So if there are moderate and low hazard materials, they shall be separated by at least 2 hours fire resistive construction. That is a special clause for special hazards. We come to the next occupancy, occupancy I, dealing with assembly buildings. As usual, the construction height and allowable areas are referring to the similar references like other occupancies. Location and property, similar references. Access and exit facilities and egress system also refer to the similar references. Although there is one point here, a special point, that universal accessibility as per provision of this code has to be ensured. Maybe there are other areas where this clause is there. It is intermittently on and off for particular occupancies. So lighting, ventilation, and sanitation with similar references. Shaft and enclosure, similar references. And now comes to the fire detection, alarm, evacuation, and extinguishment system. So actually this is a segment mostly discussed in part 4, but here there are some elaborations for the specific situation of this particular occupancy. So what is that? The first line states that it has to conform to the regulations set forth in part 4. So this is a common statement like other occupancies. But what about the rest? The specification of this section shall apply to all parts of the buildings and structures that contain stages or platforms and other similar appurtenances as herein defined. So there is a first definition. Maybe this subsections, there is a hierarchy issue. I'll mention that later. But there is a definition for stages. It says that a stage is a three-side enclosed and partially enclosed portion or partially enclosed portion of a building which is designed or used for presentation of plays or lectures or other entertainments. A stage shall be further classified as, so it has three types of classification. One is legitimate stage, two is regular stage, so the third one is thrust stage. So actually here they are not B, C and D, they are rather A1, A2 and A3. These are not the of the same hierarchy actually. So let us go into the elaboration of each three type of stages. Stage legitimate is a stage where curtains, drops, leg drops, scenery, lighting devices and other stage effects are adjustable horizontally or vertically or suspended overhead. So this is a particular type of stage. It is called legitimate stage. So it has curtains, drops, leg drops, scenery, lighting devices or other stage effects tools that can be adjustable horizontally or vertically or suspended overhead. The second type is a regular stage, a stage wherein curtain, fixed drops, valances, scenery and other stage effects are suspended and are not adjustable or retractable. So they are fixed actually, they cannot be adjusted or retracted. So this is another type of stage, regular stage. The third stage is a thrust stage, stage thrust, a stage or platform extended beyond the proscenium line into the audience. So a thrust stage is basically a stage that is, as you can see, that usually there is a in an auditorium situation. I'm just drawing a very schematic drawing of a situation here. So this is the audience area, this is the performance area. The stage is for mainly for performance. So a thrust stage is something which comes out the proscenium line. So proscenium line is here somewhere, the overhead defining area of the stage. So when the stage crosses this line, it is called thrust stage. So A stage or platform extended beyond the proscenium line, that is the definition of the thrust stage, and into the audience. So it comes to the audience, very closer to the audience. So for these three types of situations, we need to take special measures. So for legitimate stage shall be constructed as specified by part 4 and shall not be less than construction type 1C. So at least 2 hours fire resistance with non-combustible materials. So stage, the position of the legitimate stage extending beyond the proscenium opening line shall be permitted to be constructed with 2-hour fire resistive material. So if it crosses the line of proscenium, so then it will become a so it is also type 1C type of construction. The floor of the stage may be constructed with 1 hour fire rating materials. As you know that usually it is made of wood. Wooden floors are preferred in most of the cases. So it has to be 1 hour fire rating. Thickness of the wood floor shall not be less than 50 millimeter. So to ensure that fire rating, we need to work on the thickness of the wooden floor or other treatments if necessary. For a regular and thrust stage, regular stages and thrust stages shall be constructed by not less than 2-hour fire resistive materials. Wooden floor, when required in a stage, shall not be less than 50 millimeter in thickness with 1 hour fire resistive rating. So for the performance area where the stage is located, we need to make it with when it is wooden floor, it has to have a 1 hour fire rating. But if it crosses the proscenium line, it has to be the total stage must be of 2-hour fire rating, and if it crosses the proscenium line, it has to be 2-hour fire rating all along. So there are special provisions for trapdoors. All trapdoors or any other opening in a stage shall be equipped with tight-fitting solid wood trapdoors. So any trapdoor that might be the part of the stage has to be a tight-fitting solid wood trapdoors with a specific thickness not less than 50 millimeter. Stage rigging loft. The gridiron frame in the loft housing lighting and audio equipment, it happens in the proscenium on the top side of the proscenium. Housing the lighting and audio equipment, all the machinery for flying scenery or fly galleries along with their installations shall be constructed of approved non-combustible material. So there is a material specification for the stage rigging loft. Footlights and stage electrical equipments. There will be many footlights and stage electrical equipments. So for them, they shall be installed in a protective cover constructed of non-combustible material. So there must be special measures to protect them with protective cover made with non-combustible materials. Trim, finish and decorative hangings. All materials used in molding and decoration around the proscenium shall be approved non-combustible material. So this is very important that the material surrounding the stages must be non-combustible, except the wooden floor, but it has a particular specific criteria. If used, it may not be wooden floor as well. So proscenium carton. The proscenium carton shall be of approved fire retardant material. So it has to have a fire rating also, and shall protect against passage of flame and smoke for at least 30 minutes. So it has to, since it is a large curtain, and in case of any fire event, it may pose hazard to both the audience and the performers, because it mainly, its location is in between. So it must be made of material that is fire retardant material, and it has to protect people, and flame or smoke cannot spread quickly on it. It has to be of such material, and it will protect for at least 30 minutes. So this is one criteria about proscenium carton. And when there is a projection facility in such facilities, like motion picture projection rooms, every projection room shall be constructed in conformity with the construction requirements for the type of building in which the projection room is located. The wall opening requirement for projections need not have a fire protected assembly. So since there is a aperture in the projection room for projection facility, that particular opening need not have a fire protected assembly, so it can be non-protected opening, but shall be closed with glass or other approved materials. So it will not be an open connection, it will be a closed, it has to be closed with glass or other approved material. The floor area of a projection room shall not be less than 8 meters square for a single machine. The working space between the machines when more than one machine is used shall not be less than 0.75 meter. So it is about the area specification of the machine room, projection room. Excuse me. The height of the projection room shall have minimum clear space of 2.5 meter. So this is the requirement for projection room infrastructure. So this is one type of assemblies where stages and projections are there. Now we'll go for the other type of assembly occupancies, like sports facilities, where a large amount of people gather together for an event, for a sports event or anything. So the vomiters, aisles and exits of sitting galleries, about it, there are few special clauses, like tunnels, aisles and exits of galleries shall be constructed conforming to the following requirements. A, there shall be a minimum of 2 exits remotely located from each other immediately to the outside. So at least 2 exits must be there. There is no provision for single exit. So there must be at least 2 exits remotely located from each other immediately to the outside for each balcony or tier. So it is mandatory for if there are balcony situations or different tier situations, we need to make sure that there are at least 2 exits from each tier or from each balcony, and that will lead immediately to the outside. So this is an emergency escape provision. There shall be at least 3 exits when seating capacity exceeds 1,000 persons. So below 1,000 persons, the minimum requirement is 2 exits. So if it crosses 1,000 persons, then there must be 3 exits, and 4 exits when it exceeds 4,000 persons. So it comes to that when the occupant load is higher, we need to create more and more exits, and of course they have to be located remotely from each other so that they can facilitate the emergency evacuation when needed. For every additional 1,000 person, the exit shall be designed to accommodate provision F given below. So there is a provision F. It is just in here, so we can visit it right now. Provision F says that the evacuation time in the gallery shall not be more than 10 minutes. So if you are a spectator in the gallery, you must be evacuated within 10 minutes. That is the last limit of evacuation. So the exits should be so in number, in size and volume that it evacuates all the spectators from the spectators area within 10 minutes and lead them to immediately to the outside, not in an interior situation. It leads them to the outside. So that is the criteria given here for any sports facilities. So B, there shall be at least 0.6 meters square of space per person in the gallery. Minimum width considered for a seat in a gallery will be 0.45 meter. There shall be maximum of 33 seats on each side of an aisle. Minimum width of the main aisles and the secondary aisles shall be 1 meter and 0.7 meter respectively. This is the minimum width. Of course, there might be other standards which may suggest a different dimension. The good practice will be to facilitate for the best. So entrance and exit facilities shall be protected with safety railings. You know, this is a situation where a crowd occurs and stampede may occur, so there must be safety railings to protect the users. Back-to-back space between two rows shall not be, two rows of seats shall not be less than 0.8 meter. The evacuation time, as we already know, that in galleries shall not be more than 10 minutes. All tunnels, aisles and exits shall conform to the safety guidelines for means of escape set forth in part 4. So this will be actually part of means of escape. And there was a question somewhere here that what is an egress? An egress is a means of escape, specifically meant for emergency situation. So 1% of the total seat capacity shall have provision for accommodation with universal accessibility. So such facilities will have one in every 100 people, universally accessible seating arrangement, but it has a specific criteria that it has to be located in the approach or exit level. So from where the fire evacuation will be easiest, it will be located there. Emergency evacuation will be easiest. So the other sports facilities like swimming pools. So the swimming pools can be of two categories. One is a private swimming pool, and the other is a public swimming pool. So swimming pools used or constructed for exclusive use by occupancy A1, a special category, occupancy A1, is available only to the occupants, and private guests shall be classified as private swimming pool. So private swimming pools are associated with occupancy A1. Any swimming pool other than private swimming pool shall be classified as public swimming pool. So all other categories of swimming pool are public swimming pool. Swimming pools shall be constructed in conformity with the following requirements. There shall be at least 1.5 meter space between any side of the swimming pool and a rear or side property line. So it has a setback criteria. It cannot go to the property line. It needs a setback of 1.5 meter spacing from rear or the back of the property line. For street property line, it needs a setback or distance for at least 2 meters. So it is a bit more in the front. Swimming pools shall be provided with overflow provisions to remove scum and other materials from the surface of the water. When water skimmers are used for private pools, there shall be one skimming device for each 50 square meter of surface area. So particularly for maintenance purpose, when skimming devices are installed, there will be 50 square meter for per skimming device. So if the pool is larger, we'll need more skimming devices there. The overflow gutters shall not be less than 75 millimeter deep, and shall be pitched to slope of 1 unit vertical to 50 units horizontal. So 1:50 will be the pitch of the gutter slope, and it has a specific location. It cannot be it shall not be less than 75 millimeter deep. So the public swimming pools shall be so designed that the pool water turnover is at least once every 8 hours. So it is also a hygiene requirement, as you can understand, that in every 8 hours the pool water must be turned over in public swimming pools. Private swimming pools shall be designed so that there is a pool water turnover at least once every 18 hours. So it is a bit relaxed for private swimming pools. Public swimming pools shall be equipped with filters, the capacity of which shall be controlled to filter 140 liters per minute per meter square of surface area. Private swimming pool filters shall not filter more than 230 liters per minute per meter square of surface area. So these are all maintenance issues mostly, and maintaining the pool and the water quality, of course. The pH value of the pool water shall be between 7 and 7.5. The recirculation system shall be equipped with an approved hair and lint stainers installed in the system ahead of the pump. So it is the safety of the pump. There are filters which protects the pump. So that is also a maintenance issue. All swimming pool and equipment shall be designed to be emptied completely of water, and the discharged water shall be disposed in an approved manner and shall not create problem to the neighboring property. So it will be the discharge of the discharge of the pool, and also about the civic responsibility of the owners and the designers, so that we cannot cause any problem to the neighbors. There will be pumps, filters, and other mechanical and electrical equipments that will be placed in enclosed spaces not accessible to the bathers. So the swimmers or bathers who are coming here cannot access its mechanical facilities and electrical facilities. They must be retained in an enclosed situation and is inaccessible to the regular users. Used water from the pool when being discarded shall be reused as grey water for the building and its premises as per provision of Appendix G. So there is an appendix for sustainability, and according to the guideline of Appendix G, we must use the pool water and other facilities or the discarded elements of the pool as grey water, and the provisions are made in Appendix G. So for fire protection, the fire protection system shall be as per provision of this code, so it is referred to Part 4. Now comes the hazardous occupancy, occupancy J. So the plans for buildings and structures accommodating occupancy J shall clearly indicate the type. I think we should highlight these points. Number 1 is the type. Number 2 is the intended use of materials. Number 3 is its processing, and number 4 is handling method. So for any hazardous building, these are very important. The type and the intended use of materials, the type of material and the intended use of material is very important, and how it is processed there, and how we are handling it. So these are the 4 points we must focus in a hazardous building, so as to reflect the nature of use of each portion of such buildings. As we know that there are 4 kinds of hazardous building, starting from explosion hazard, then we have chemical hazard, we have biological hazard, we have radiation hazard buildings. So occupancy J1 is about explosion hazard. So any building or portion thereof containing any of the following items more than exempted quantity shall be classified as occupancy J. So we already know about the exempted quantity. There was a chart, a table referred yesterday in the last presentation, which contained the exempted quantity for different hazardous material. So if any material, if any building or portion thereof contains any material that is more than exempted quantity, the building shall be classified as occupancy J1. So what are these materials and what are its specific situations? This is an overview because the more detailed measures are referred in Part 4 mostly, and in some other parts as well. So we will just have an idea here about the hazardous materials, and then relate to other parts for better understanding. So A, combustible dusts and any similar solid materials sufficiently comminuted for suspension in still air, which when so suspended is capable of self-sustained combustion. So there might be dusts which can which are so fine that it can suspend in the still air and is capable of self-sustained combustion. So this may create a situation of fire and explosion. So this is one thing. If any material more than exempted quantity is present in a facility, it has to be classified as occupancy J1. Combustible liquids. Any liquids having a flash point at or above 40 degrees centigrade shall be known as class 2 and class 3 liquids. There are divisions, there are subcategories. for class 2 and class 3, not mentioned here. We will get the detail on part 4. Combustible liquids shall be classified as liquids having flash point at or above 40 degree and below 60 degree. Second, liquids having flash points at or above 60 degrees Celsius and below 95 degrees Celsius. So actually there are two types referred here. Why it is 60 degree or 95 degrees Celsius, it depends on the material property, the chemical property of that particular liquid, but this is the matter of experts. We don't go into detail, but we can have an idea at least that this is 40 to 60 degree range, this is 60 to 95 degree range. Cryogenic solids, flammable or oxidizing, any liquid that has a boiling point below minus 130 degrees centigrade. So it has a boiling point. We are quite not familiar with liquids that has a boiling point at minus level. So it has a boiling point at minus 130 degrees Celsius. Cryogenic liquids, they might be needed for any particular operation for a particular industrial or lab facilities. So if it is there above the exempted quantity, it will be classified as occupancy J1. Flammable gases, any gas when mixed with air in a proportion of 13% by volume forms a flammable mixture under the atmospheric temperature and pressure. So if any such gases are present there, it will also be categorized as and of course more than exempted quantity, it will be categorized as J1. Flammable liquids, any liquid that has a flash point below 40 degrees centigrade and has a net vapor pressure exceeding 275 kPa at 40 degrees Celsius. Flammable liquids shall be known as class 1 liquid and shall be further classified as follows. So there are three classifications: liquids having flash points below 25 degrees Celsius and having a boiling point below 40 degrees Celsius, liquids having a flash point below 25 degrees Celsius, having a boiling point at 40 degree or above Celsius, 40 degrees centigrade or above, liquids having flash points at or above 25 degrees centigrade and below 40 degrees centigrade. So oxidizers class 3, a particular type of oxidizers, it has to be it has been referred to another code, NFPA of USA, and a particular section of that. So for oxidizer class 3, it is referred to that code. Oxidizing gases as determined in accordance with NFPA 43C, again it is referred to another code. So this referencing continues. It can be referred to this code, this particular part, or to other part, or even to other international codes as well. Pyrophoric liquids, solids and gases that will ignite spontaneously in air at a temperature of 55 degrees centigrade or below. So this is another criteria. Am I audible? I think I'm having some network trouble here. Can you listen to me? Okay, but the screen share is not working properly. Let me share it again. So there are we were here at section 5 and section F and G. So then comes section H, pyrophoric liquids, solids and gases that will ignite spontaneously in air at a temperature of 55 degrees centigrade or below. So the, within exempted quantity, it will be part of the main occupancy, but above exempted quantity, it will be classified as J1. Unstable or reactive materials of class 3, non-detonable, as determined in accordance with NFPA 704. So that is another hazardous material. Combustible fibers. This is very relevant to us in many industries or in many production areas. We use materials that falls into this category. Includes readily ignitable fibers like cotton, sisal, jute, hemp, tow, cocoa fiber, oakum, baled waste paper, kapok, hay, straw, excelsior, Spanish moss, and other similar materials. So these are all combustible materials, and there is an exempted quantity for them in part 4. So above that, they will be categorized as J1. Flammable solids. Flammable solid is any solid, including blasting agent or explosive, that is liable to cause fire through absorption of moisture, spontaneous chemical change, and retained heat from manufacturing and processing, or which, when ignited, burns so vigorously and persistently as to create a serious hazard. So these are flammable solids. Organic peroxides, class 2 and class 3, as determined in accordance with NFPA 43B. Oxidizers, class 1 and class 2, as determined in accordance with NFPA 43A. The bulk storage of unstable reactive material, class 1 and class 2, as determined in accordance with NFPA 704. Water reactive materials, class 2 and class 3, which reacts with water to release a gas that is either flammable or present a health hazard, as determined in accordance with NFPA 704. So we can see that lots of references to NFPA for occupancy J1. For occupancy J2, as we can see from our previous classification, it is about chemical hazard occupancy. So there are different type of hazards. One is corrosive, one is highly toxic material, and the toxicity may be oral toxicity or toxicity of inhalation or toxicity by skin absorption. So there are different type of toxicity and there are provisions for that. It can be irritants as well. So any chemical deposition can create allergic reaction or inflammation in any part or tissue of the body. So they can be irritant as well. They can be radioactive material, so that is also a kind of hazard. They can be sensitizers. For toxicity, we have these subcategories, and we have the determined reference for them here. Again, after covering the J2 category, there is some special components or projects that also will be categorized as J2, which are dry cleaning establishments using flammable solvents. So it will be categorized in J2. Explosive manufacturing, J2. Paint and solvent manufacturing, flammable base, will be J2. Pyrexene plastic manufacturing will be J2. Sodium nitrate and ammonium nitrate will be J2. Storage of combustible film is J2. So all these items were present will become hazardous occupancy J2. Now comes the occupancy J3. J3, again, it is about the storage, handling, processing, manufacturing of materials and products that is using biological processes, and in which the risk of harmful biological threat to the occupants exist. Here is one important reference that the guidelines specified by the Department of Health must be complied with. So for occupancy J3, there is a new authority as well. We must comply to the guidelines of Department of Health. Occupancy J4, occupancy J3 was biological hazard, by the way. So occupancy J4 is radiation hazard. So as usual, the storage, handling, processing, manufacturing of materials and products that bears the risk of radioactive contamination, they must comply with another authorities guideline, that is Bangladesh Atomic Energy Commission. The guidelines of Bangladesh Atomic Energy Commission will be complied for occupancy J4. So special provisions. The following shall not be included in occupancy J, but shall be classified in the occupancy group which they most nearly resemble, and such classification shall be approved by the authority. So there are some exemptions here. All buildings and structures and part thereof which contains less than the exempt quantities as specified in table 3.2.5, when such buildings comply with the fire protection provisions of this code. So if you have a hazardous material less than exempted quantity and you comply with the fire protection provisions of this code, you can have it as an accessory occupancy of your main occupancy. So that is one special provision. Rooms containing flammable liquid in lightly closed container of 4 liter capacity or less for retail sales or private use on the premise, and in quantities not exceeding 820 liters per meter square of the room area. So this is a provision made for merchandising flammable liquids. It has a limit of not exceeding 820 liters per meter square of room area, and the container size is also explained. There is for paint retail sales, the quantity will be 820 liters per meter square. It cannot exceed a room area where the paint is more than 820 liters per square meter. So closed system housing flammable and combustible liquids or gases used for the operation of machinery or equipment. The closed system is basically a system that deprive the or that allows the combustible situation or the with the assistance of oxygen within a closed environment, closed container. So that is called closed system. So for this, there will be a flexibility. Cleaning establishments will be out of this criteria. Liquor stores, distributors without bulk storage. So liquor stores and distributors without bulk storage will fall into this category. Tire storage containing less than 10,000 vehicles tires. The storage or use of materials for agriculture purpose. Likewise, some other elements like pyrophoric solids and liquids not exceeding 3 meter cube in storage cabinet in a building that is equipped throughout with an automatic sprinkler system will be exempted from J1 category, and that must comply with the fire provision of this code. 3 kg of storage cabinet or less of pyrophoric solids and liquids installed with an sprinkler system will also be exempted if it is compliance with fire protection provisions. Class 2 water reactive materials not exceeding 100 kg in an approved storage provided with automatic sprinkler and fire protection provisions will also be exempted. So therefore, there are few provisions for construction and height and allowable area. Let's go to the floors and spaces containing hazardous material and in areas where motor vehicles, boats, helicopters, airplanes are stored, repaired, operated shall be of non-combustible liquid tight construction. So there is a new type of construction, liquid tight construction. The liquid cannot penetrate through the floor and the material must be non-combustible. There will be some exceptions. We are not going into the detail. So spill control for such floors where hazardous repair are happening, there will be a recess to prevent flow of liquids to adjoining areas. Drainage, there will be drainage provisions for this particular situation. And we are quite familiar with this hazardous material exempted quantity. We have gone through it in the last presentation, so I'm not going into the detail of these materials again. So there is just one footnote here that the maximum quantities may be increased by 100% where areas are not accessible to public in the buildings, provided with automatic sprinkler system. So here is a quantity defined, but they can be increased 100% if the area is not publicly accessible and fitted with automatic sprinkler system. And there are few provisions for which we need to consult Explosive Control Act. So separate drainage system and containment and overflow of liquids when such hazardous materials are dealt with, we need to have a secondary containment system which will collect the residue and clean it before disposing it to the adjoining property or storm drain or any other sewerage system. So it is also about the secondary containment storage. Smoke, heat and vents shall be provided. Standby power. Standby power shall be provided in the occupancies where class 1, 2 and 3 organic peroxides are stored. So this is a special situation that is needed for a particular type of storage. So location of the property and access and exit and emergency escape, lighting and ventilation goes almost in a similar way. Ventilation in hazardous location. Yep. Out of time. Okay. 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 Well, yep. Yeah. I think I'll try to wrap it up within 10 minutes and then we'll go for the question and answer session. Thank you. So, so ventilation of hazardous location, there are provisions for that, the mechanical ventilation, how it will be segregated or separated, especially the areas where hazardous uses are. There are provisions for that. And there are other provisions for ventilation. Sanitation, shaft and exit enclosure, fire detection alarm, evacuation, extinguishing system. As you know, they are referring to the same references again. And for explosion control, there are few provisions. So we are not going to the detail right now, but there are a few ideas that can be introduced here. One is about protective devices or suppression system or barricades. They can be used to control or vent the gases. So there are explosion venting measures usually directed to exterior walls or roofs where it is safe to discharge. So that is one of the ideas. In areas where such risk is involved, lightweight materials in walls are constructed. It is not attempted to control the explosion, rather it is allowed to within safety provisions, it is allowed to vent it out in some direction. Light fastening hatch covers. Hatch covers must be lightly fastened. Light fastening outward opening swing doors or exterior walls, so that if anything happens, the door bursts outward and vent out the major load of the explosion. And non-bearing walls with light ties. So these are the explosion measures. For special hazard situation, chimneys, vents, and ducts must be of non-combustible material. Like for boiler, heating plant, electrical room, water supply boiler, they has to be separated from the rest of the occupancies, and it must have a 2-hour fire resistive construction or more. There are a few points. We are not touching them. We have some shortage of time. For the occupancy K, the garage building, there are a few special provisions, like all garage floors shall be constructed with no less than 4-hour fire resistive material. The floors, of course. So floors has to be non-combustible liquid tight construction. Spill control, garages may create hazardous liquids or elements. So we must control speed. Drainage, we must have approved drainage system and a secondary containment system for hazardous material and fire protection of water. Fire protection water. So the drainage system must be designed in a manner so that in case of fire, when sprinkler system is on, it has to carry the discharge of sprinklers. That must be considered in designing drainage system. Quality of discharge of liquids must be of approved level before discharging it to sewer, natural system, or river. The other things are like common references for this particular occupancy. The occupancy L, as we know that it is, it can be considered as non-separable occupancy or occupancy with special measures. It has all the similar things like other occupancies, but a few special features which we have already covered in other areas, like when chimney vents and ventilation ducts are there, it has to be of non-combustible materials, like boilers, central heating, electrical rooms. It has to be 2-hour fire resistive construction, where it has a risk of generating spark, flame, or glow. It has to be installed or used within 0.5 meter of the floor. it has to be, it shall not be installed or used within 0.5 meter of the floor. So it will be lifted up. Equipment or machinery that produces or emits combustible or explosive dusts, there will be measures for that. So that is what is occupancy L, or utility occupancy, is. Requirement for occupancy M, or miscellaneous, as we already know that it has two subcategories. One is M1 and the other is M2. The buildings or parts thereof classified as occupancy M shall be limited to type of construction set forth in 3.2.4 and shall comply with the requirement of section. It is a general information or references leading to other chapters and parts. So it is quite common. And finally, the A to Z list is here, where all the or many of the occupancies are listed below. We have already given an orientation about this A to Z list, and that's the last part of our segment 3. So actually we have covered in this segment occupancy H, I, J, K, L, M, and this is the end of segment 3. Thank you. So I think, I'm sorry for taking more time, but I think now we can go for the question answer session. Thank you all. So I'm stopping the screen share and going for the questions. There is a question saying openings include windows. Yes, opening include windows. When we calculate total floor area for FAR calculation, is it considered that ground floor area or not? I'm not very sure what is meant by this question, but basically, yes, in FAR calculation, if the ground floor is utilized for private parking or the associated utilities, then it can be excluded from the FAR. And it is also applicable if it is located in the basement or anywhere in the project. So it will be, sorry, am I disconnected? Okay, okay. So it is the parking, the private parking and the utilities, it has a certain proportion, and if they are located at any location in the ground floor or basement or other locations, it will be exempted from FAR. The presentation material shown should be mailed to use as reference, to us as reference. The PPT doesn't provide the information. Thanks. Yeah. Sorry for that we haven't provided it earlier. We have shared a PDF file, and I'll mail it to the authority, and at the same time I'll have a screenshot of the diagrams we have drawn today, and I will also mail it to the authorities. Can we get your presenter slide? As given material and presenter slide is different, it will be helpful if you share. Of course, I'll do that. Please explain elaborately 2.5.3.2 how to provide these exit ways. Well, let me check, but actually The exit ways will be dealt with part 4. So let me check what it is. 2.5 point. 3.2. Okay. Okay. Well, it says that every sleeping room in ground, first and second floor shall have at least one operable window or door for emergency escape, which shall open directly into the exterior or an interior courtyard. The units shall be operable from the inside without the use of any tool to provide a minimum clear opening of 500 millimeter width by 600 millimeter height, with a maximum seal height of 1 meter above the floor. Yeah, this is I think this is clear enough that it is a requirement for every sleeping room. It is basically meant for emergency escape, as it is mentioned already, that it is meant for emergency escape, but there will be provision for every sleeping room so that in case of emergency, people can be evacuated from there. So that is the provision made here. I think it is self-explanatory. For semi-detached building, is this system obey the rules of setback? We have a chart, table containing plot areas and setback requirements, which is not covered in today's lecture. It says about what will be the condition for semi-detached buildings. Well, in a semi-detached building, it will have a, one wall shared with the neighbor at the property line, but the other three side needs setback rules, so needs to comply with the setback rules. So for semi-detached building, it will be like that. In this lecture, there is no informative information. Sorry for that. Very recent gas cylinders are stored at ground floor reticulation system in apartment buildings. What is guideline in BNBC? Well, actually, there are provisions for exempted quantities if they are stored according to the guidelines of exempted quantity. They will be categorized as part of that occupancy. But if they are not, they will be part of occupancy J. So it will be a mixed occupancy then. Is it possible to have your marked pages from BNBC 2020? Yes, of course. I'll send it today. Some of the slides which is being presented are not available in the downloadable content. Well, you can download it later. What does it mean by egress system? As I have mentioned during the presentation, an egress system is a escape system that is used for emergency escape. You will have more information about egress system in part 4. If 1 hour of fire resisting, what is the minimum slab thickness? Is it greater than the calculated slab thickness of occupancy type A2 residential building? Well, this information is also available in part 4. You can visit part 4 and have more information about the thickness of materials like slabs and walls there. In a 3-storied building, ground floor is using for utility purpose like generator, compressor, substation, water treatment plant, etc. First floor is using for storage, and second floor is using for canteen. As per code, is there any barrier for occupancy, or which occupancy type it will cover? Actually, it is definitely a mixed situation, mixed occupancy situation. So the generator, compressor, substation, WTP, if they are accessory to the main occupancy, I don't know what the main occupancy here is, either the storage or the canteen. So we have to see that if they can be accessories to the main occupancy, but for storage, depending upon the material that we are storing and the quantity and the processing and handling of the system, it has to be storage category or hazardous category. So from this information, it cannot be determined which category they are. So it might require separation by distance, it may not. So we have to go more detail for that. Well, where to find Explosive Control Act? It has to be searched on the website of, we have a Bishforok Adhidaptor who deals with these issues. And if not found there, you have to go to their offices and collect it. So can we get the recorded webinar pro? I think the management can tell it better. I have a question to pro, I think, yeah. Yeah, and there is another question for you. Is there any architectural guidelines to work in USA? As we know that for structural design, we follow ACI guideline, but for architectural working, which guideline is followed by USA or other countries? So I move to the next questions. There are only 2 questions left. A question from Asan says, table 3.1.7 footnote say, for 1E construction, maximum allowable story height 1 story, and section 1.9.2.4 say 3 story and 11 meter. Could you please explain? Yes, yes, there are different guidelines at different places for construction types. But when it happens that there are two separate guidelines which do not match to each other, we must follow the most restrictive guideline. So in this case, we must follow the first one, where the maximum allowable story is height 1 story. That is the answer. If the emergency exit are located in the rear side of the building adjoining with sleeping room, then how to evacuate the residents? Well, that is an issue that will be dealt with the fire department or the neighbors. I think to comply with the code, we can locate it in the rear side of the building. There is no bar for that. So I have few more questions. Okay, so, that is the sharing of the same presentation that I have presented today. We will share it. That's all. So thank you all.